So you just said you were introduced to computer science at a really young age in like fourth grade. Um, what kind of, and I know you're currently heavily advocating for exposure to STEM for young girls today. What kind of, how did that exposure, because that exposure came so early, what kind of lasting impact did that have, especially on your desire to expose more young girls to STEM?
Yeah. I think having been exposed to it early enough and also going to this really cool elementary school that was small enough and interesting enough that no one really gave me the message like girls don't do that. I think there's other places where it would have gotten kind of hammered into me of like, girls don't do math or science or computers, And so I kind of already had fallen in love with those things by the time in middle school I went to a public school where I did get a lot more of that. No one means to do it. Like they have their own bias that they don't even realize they're doing, I'm sure, for the most part. But I think because I was kind of already hooked, it didn't really matter when that was what was being said, because I was like, forget it. I already like it. Like, go away. I don't care about that. So I think that definitely helped. And in terms of like sort of advocating for girls in STEM, I think one of the things for me was that understanding how hard it was for me when I was in college and I was one of only a few girls and there really wasn't support, that I just didn't want, if there was something I could do to help that, it felt really wrong that like, hey, I'm interested in this thing. And now I have this whole extra struggle on top of just trying to learn computer science. Like that feels really sort of wrong to me. And so I saw this math and science camp for girls in about 2003. And I wrote and said, hey, I know your camp's happening next week, so it's too late for this year, but like, I was like giving them my credentials. I'm like, well, I went to Harvard and studied computer science and I work at Pixar. So if there's ever anything I can do, I wish I had this kind of camp when I was growing up. It was for girls between 7th and 8th grade done at Stanford. And I got an email back within like an hour, and the woman who runs it, who's this powerhouse, she was like, I've signed you up for 3 classes for next week. And I was like, oh no, like, I don't know how to do that. And so I drove down there with, I had a VHS tape that was sort of a breakdown of like, here's how a shot starts in the movie and how it progresses through at each sort of level till it's the finished thing in the movie, called a progression reel. And Publicity gave me this is right when Finding Nemo had come out. And so they gave me a giant stuffed Dory and a giant stuffed marlin. And so I drove down in my car on the highway and people were giving me the funniest looks because I had these enormous stuffed animals. And I went and I just had a pad of paper and a VHS player, and I'd play it and stop and then draw like XYZ axis on the pad and explain how points made up the whole world. And, I saw sort of when I was doing that, the girls' eyes lit up because it was stuff that they recognized. And I was telling them that made Pixar films. And it felt like the same reaction I had of like, wait a second, all the stuff I'm doing can create worlds and characters and tell stories. And like, that's so magical to me that like, I could just see that they were having some of the same reaction. And so it felt like, well, Pixar's a pretty easy sell for most people. And so like, if I can use that to get more girls to like see the possibilities of STEM, then like that. So that's kind of how I got into talking about it and advocating for it and trying to sell the STEM to kids. So